Well, good morning, or good morning. It's a good afternoon, right? Just right at noon. I've got 12:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. I'm sure people might continue to log in and get set up. So we'll go ahead and get started, but feel free to listen. Amy has started recording our session today. And I want to do a quick shout out to Amy Meehan. She's behind the scenes today, but major helper as I still struggle with Zoom and technology after a year and a half of working on it. So Amy, thank you for all of your help. She'll be putting some things in the chat and monitoring and sharing some links throughout our time today. So I want to welcome you to this webinar. It's on the benefits of silence. And my name is Laura Stanton. I'm the Family and Consumer Science educator down in Warren County, which is in the southwest corner of the state. I always tell people if you've been to Kings Island, then you've been to Warren County. That's just about 10 minutes from my office. We're glad you're here and really excited to talk about a topic that I have a passion for, which is about the health benefits of silence. If we were going to boil down our webinar today into three main points, it would be that noise is bad, silence is good, and it's beneficial to wrap silence into your personal and perhaps your professional life. So I want to, let's see if it's advancing. Okay, good. It's like, uh-oh. I just want to tell you a little bit about me. I find these webinars a little awkward and it's hard to connect with people in this little tiny box of mine. But I am married, I'm a wife, I have two teenagers right now. Even looking at this picture, they've changed a lot since that picture. But people often ask me how I got interested in this topic. And I just want to share that about 6 years ago, I was feeling very drained. I was in the throes of parenting two, at the time, kind of tweenagers, and really hit a rough patch on an individual level, as a parent, and even as a partner. I was feeling depressed. And I just felt like I was drowning in a lot of negativity and conflict, and just really woke up every morning not really sure where I was headed, but felt like it was going to be heading south. So I knew I needed to do something for myself, but I didn't know what that was. And then just luckily, I was at the congregation I attend, and they had a flyer for a 24-hour silent retreat that was happening at a spiritual retreat center that was really close to my home. And I signed up, not really knowing what I was getting myself into. So a lot of people have questions about what a silent retreat might look like. So I just want to paint a picture. The spiritual retreat center kind of is like a college campus, like a dorm. There's group dining. We each had our private rooms, but we were in common spaces together, eating and just living together for those 24 hours. We spent our days separated and spread out, and we even wore name tags that said we were in silence. And we had created some guidelines about how we would behave and act around each other as we were in silence, because you can imagine it's a little bit socially awkward. And honestly, just being truthful here, the first retreat, I think I spent a lot of those 24 hours either sleeping or reading. They're both silent activities, right? But I needed that. And that's what I did. And that was what felt comfortable that first time. And after those 24 hours, it was just the beginning of this dawning realization that I needed more of that in my life. So I signed up for other retreats, probably within 6 months, and they kept getting longer in duration. We went from 24 hours to 48 hours to long weekends. And what I found is each time I got to the retreat, I kind of felt like I was slipping into a really comfortable pair of clothes. I just felt settled in ways I didn't feel settled in other times of my life. I did a lot less reading and sleeping. And I noticed that time felt different and that I felt different. And I'll share a little bit more about my journey, but I just want to give you that background so you understand where I'm coming from today. So let's just start off with some really basic information and definitions. So noise. Today and probably throughout your life, when you think about noise, you think about unwanted or disagreeable sound. And this can be subjective. I often think of like a train whistle. I live near a depot where occasionally a train goes by. It's pretty far out in the distance. And there's something to me that's like homey or romantic about that train whistle. But if I lived right next to a railroad track where a train went by, every 11 minutes, probably wouldn't think it was comfortable or romantic sound to hear. So certainly noise is subjective. If you think about a neighbor's dog barking in the middle of the night, probably most people would agree that's annoying. But we can also think about noise objectively, and we can measure how loud it is, the decibels. I'm not going to get into the science of all of that right now, but just to know that we can objectively measure sounds and noise. So to get us started, I just want to encourage you, I can't see your faces, but wherever you are, if it's possible, just close your eyes, and I'm just going to count for about 10 seconds and ask you to pay attention to the noises and the sounds around you. So go ahead and do that. All right. If you're willing and able, if you type in the chat what sounds you heard, that would be really interesting to see where people are and what they experienced. But the chances are you heard human-made sounds. In my office, I hear like the air conditioning, and my laptop is making weird noises, so I hear my laptop. I see some comments coming in the chat. That's lovely. I love seeing that. So make sure if you can look through the chat and see traffic, mowing. These are great. Someone hears their own ears ringing. That's definitely a possibility when it's quiet. So look through those things and pay attention to the sounds that you hear. And I also want to just remind you that a lot of the sounds could be outdoor, but there's indoor noises as well. Blenders and garbage disposals are some of the loudest noises inside that we are occasionally exposed to. So I want you to think about the noises that drive you nuts. We all have them, and they might be different. But think about the noises that really grate your nerves, that really might send you into a tizzy. And as you think about those noises, I want you to think about your physical, emotional, and/or mental responses to those noises. And just hold on to those feelings, and we'll come back to that. But it's important to kind of connect with those thoughts when we talk about noise. So next, I want to talk about quiet and silence. So here, I want to think about quiet as little or no noise, and then silence as the lack of noise. So again, we're doing a little bit of self-reflection, but I'd like you to imagine a place or a time in your life when you were surrounded by quiet or silence. And again, think about what that felt like for you. What emotions does it bring out? And for me, I always think about silence like just a big, warm, fuzzy blanket that somehow encompasses my whole entire body, and I feel safe, secure, and just comfortable. So a lot of us have heard of Florence Nightingale. She's a famous British nurse. And in 1859, she said, "Unnecessary noise is the most cruel abuse of care that can be inflicted on either the sick or the well." Unnecessary noise is the most cruel abuse of care that can be inflicted on either the sick or the well. And I think that's really amazing that she made that observation in 1859. and she noticed that noise could be a source of alarm, distress, and loss of sleep for recovering patients. So before we start talking about this, I'd like to just ask you, Amy's going to put a poll up, but have you ever thought about the health consequences of noise? And we've got strongly agree, agree, neither agree or disagree, disagree, and strongly disagree. There's no right answer. I'm just kind of curious if people have thought about it, because I certainly hadn't before I got into this. Wait a couple more seconds as everyone's getting a chance to vote here. All right. It looks like about 25 of you were able to fill that out. So Amy, if you don't mind, we'll share that result. But it looks like about 5 of you, or about 20%, have strongly agree, 14 agree that you have thought about the health consequences of noise. So I'm glad to hear that, because it is a topic that doesn't really get a whole lot of press. And then some of you said neither disagree or agree. And then 3 of you said you haven't thought about it. And I appreciate your honesty. There's no, like I said, no right or wrong answer there, but just get a feel of how we think about noise, because like I said before I started doing this, I really hadn't thought about it. Thanks for doing that poll, Amy. So when we talk about the adverse health effects of noise, I want you to go back and think about that noise I asked you about, the noises that drive you crazy and your reaction to them. And if you're willing and able to put those in chat, that's great. No pressure. But I think it's not hard to connect those annoying noises with a reaction or a response that is a negative one. So if you think about that noise that really drives you nuts, and then you think about carrying that around with you on a daily basis, and you think about the long-term implications, it's not hard to imagine that there are adverse health effects to those noises. So in 2011, the World Health Organization, what we often call WHO, they called noise pollution a modern plague, and concluded that there is overwhelming evidence that noise has adverse effects on the health of the entire population. And some of those, again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but some of those negative health consequences include hearing loss, high blood pressure, heart disease, loss of sleep, and just an overall general reduction in the quality of life. And again, if you think about that, I don't think it's hard to imagine. I see some of you who have wrote and shared the noises that drive you crazy: car alarms, sudden loud noises, dogs barking. All of those things, if you're exposed to them, certainly cause your heart rate to go up and can cause long-term damage to your hearing. But I'd like to specifically point out some adverse health effects that we've noticed on children. So these noise impacts are across the lifespan. And I want to share with you again some examples, just kind of just scratching the surface. But here are just some results of some studies that have been done. It was shown that infants that are born to mothers who live near an airport and were exposed to airport noises had lower birth weight and more birth defects than infants born to women living in quieter communities. So even in utero, we see these differences. Another study showed that in neonatal intensive care units, researchers found that the higher noise levels elevated the blood pressure, it increased the heart rates, and it disrupted the sleep patterns of premature infants. That connects right to what Florence Nightingale had said. And then numerous studies show that chronic noise can impair a child's development and may have a lifelong impact on educational attainment and overall health. So the United States EPA did a study in 2009, and not only did they look at the physical and psychological health of noise and its impact on children, but they also pointed out that it impairs learning and behavioral issues. So they found research that shows that it interferes with speech and language. It can impair learning, hearing. It disturbs the cardiovascular system of young children, and it disturbs their sleep. So these are all really pretty intense and significant issues to think about when we think about our kids and ourselves as adults and the impact that noise can have. So that's just a brief summation of the first point, which is noise can be bad. All right, so then let's flip and look at the other side of the coin, which are the health benefits of silence. But before we do that, how are we doing on time? Okay, I would like to encourage you to get comfortable wherever you are. And I'm just going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And I'd like you to be quiet for 2 minutes. And I already asked you about the noises around you. So some of you are going to have quiet. Some of you are going to have silence. Somebody shared that they had silence, which is really nice to hear. But I'm going to stop talking, and in 2 minutes I'll come back. But I'd like you to just be comfortable. I think it helps to close your eyes often and just relax and let silence take over. Okay, if you're still there and you didn't fall asleep, if you'll open your eyes and come back. And I'd like to just ask if you're willing and able in the chat box to tell me how that felt. Right, I see relaxing, peaceful, refreshing, wonderful. My mind is noisy, that's okay. Comforting, calming, as if time stopped. Yes, I love this because this is what my experience has been as well. So thank you for sharing that. And just imagine 2 minutes. Imagine if you created that in your life for longer periods of time. And sometimes 2 minutes is all we can do. I know somebody talked about locking themselves in the bathroom. Like, I can still relate to that. And I'm sure other people can too. But there's something magical that happens when we have that time to ourselves and when we embrace the quiet and the solitude. So thank you so much for sharing that. I do see somebody said they couldn't have as much quiet and peace as they want. And that's another frustration. So thank you for sharing all of those. So hopefully you yourself can see the benefits of silence after just that 2-minute experience. But I want to share with you really some great research that also just backs up what you experienced yourself. And that is that we know, and we can see from these research studies, that when people experience silence, they notice an immediate decrease in stress and a reduction in tension. People's blood pressure lowers, and there's an increased blood flow to the brain. So people who experience and practice silence also notice an improvement in their sleep patterns, less insomnia, less fatigue, less depression. People report an improved ability to focus and promote cognitive development, a boost in the body's immune system, and changes in the hormones in the body, including lower adrenaline and cortisol levels, which are all symptoms of stress. And what's really super exciting, there's brand new research that is suggesting that silence may actually, create new brain cells and help improve the memory of older adults. In addition to these physical and mental, emotional benefits of silence, there's also research to suggest that people have increased creativity, a greater awareness of themselves and their environment, and a greater and deeper ability to reflect. And that's certainly, again, what I noticed after spending time at a silent retreat. But just, if you will, today, carry those feelings that you had in those 2 minutes. And then, all the words I say, that's one thing, but you had that little brief taste of silence. So keep remembering those feelings. So this sums up our second major point, which is silence is good. Sorry, there's a delay when I do this. There we go. So if we know it's good, some of you had that experience of what it felt like. So the next question is, how do we get it? Like, how do we make this happen? Before I go into the tips, I do want to just say really fast, quiet is great. If you can attain quiet, that's great. Like I said, there is a difference between quiet and silence. And there's actually, I want to just share with you a really quick, fascinating study. This was published in a journal called Heart. And I get all geeked out about this, but these two researchers wanted to see how people's brain activity changed when they listened to quiet, relaxing music. And so they had the people all hooked up and they would play little snippets of a song. And then there'd be 2 minutes of quiet. And then they'd play another snippet and then quiet, another snippet. You get the idea. So they're interested to see how the music changed the brain functioning. And what happened is they found something they never expected. And that was that people's brain activity and the circulation in the brain and the blood pressure changed the most, not during any particular song, but in the 2 minutes between each song when it was quiet and silent. I find that fascinating. And so the idea of listening to quiet music, while that's nice, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, it's not the same as silence. So just keep that in mind. One of the things, just like exercise or eating well, if you want to practice silence, then you have to make a plan. So you need to be deliberate about it. Set boundaries. One of the things that's crushing our ability to find quiet and silence is our phones that we carry with us. All the notifications, the beeps, the alarms, all of those things wreck quiet and silence. So turn them off, set boundaries about when you're going to do it. If you're new to silence, I really encourage you to just light a candle and be in a room. And if you just find someone said their mind is noisy, just watch the candle, watch it flicker, watch it move, and you will start practicing silence. And eventually you won't have to look at the candle, but it's a good way to get started. And really, you all did 2 minutes. So start with 2 minutes and then just keep increasing the time and find what works for you. Just keep trying. There is no one way to do silence. You can do it however you want. And you might not notice anything at first. I told you I slept and read my first silent retreat. And that's okay. Like, just figure it out and just keep it challenging yourself to dig deeper for what that looks like and how to get the most benefit. I'm going to share with you what it looks like for me, but that doesn't mean that's what it needs to look like for you. What I've found over the 6 years of practicing silence is, for me, magic, and I do mean magic. It happens when I'm in nature by myself in a quiet place and hopefully silent. I joke that I have turned into Thoreau and I just can be outside. On the weekends, I try to get out. And as soon as I'm out, I don't want to come back. Like, I'll be out for hours. I don't eat. I don't go to the bathroom. Like, all my worldly needs go away. And I am just connected to myself and to the world around me. And it fills my bucket. And I'm a much better wife, better parent, better person when I have that time to engage in true silence and solitude. I think that everybody should have that opportunity to experience silence in whatever way works for them. And sometimes I also teach about mindfulness. We talk about doing what you're already doing, but just try to do it in silence. Sometimes we get into the habit of getting in our car and we turn on the radio, but we're in the car by ourselves, so we can practice silence without adding things to our to-do list. But just encourage yourself to find ways to weave that in. I'm also going to be sharing a link so you can find some more tips that I've written down if you need more structure or need more information. All right, so just reflection questions. Think about what this means to you, and think about if it impacts you personally, professionally, or both. And then maybe think about who might need to hear this message. It's something that I've kind of become, a big advocate of because it's made such a big difference in my life. But think about if there's other people that you'd like to share this with, and feel free to do that. I always feel like it's important just to note that as much as silence is available to all of us without costing anything, I don't want people to think they have to go to a retreat. You don't. But the truth of the matter is that that quiet and that silence is not equally available to everybody. So we know poor and urban neighborhoods tend to be the noisiest neighborhoods. So you might also think about if you teach, or if you're in a school, or if you have family members in particularly noisy environments. Make sure you share this with them and help them think about ways to recognize the dangerous and adverse effects of noise, but then also those benefits of quiet and silence. Amy, if you don't mind, in the chat, would you share the website? I have a website on our county page. Oh, Amy, you're so quick. Thank you. With lots of resources. I don't want to say lots of, but there are lots of resources here. I've created a book list that includes children's books about quiet and silence, as well as adult books. I just want to point out what really got me going, and it's listed on the adult book list, is a book called Listening Below the Noise, the transformative power of silence. I'll get it out eventually. So it's a real quick little tiny book, but it helped me think about silence more. And like I said, I've written an article that has some of those tips and some of the research that I share today listed on that. And then also, if you have children or grandchildren, or you are around little children, there's also a noisy toy list that's published every year by an organization called the Sight and Hearing Association. And it's really amazing how loud a lot of children's toys are. So we want to be mindful of that. No, I'm a couple minutes over, so just we're going to wrap up here. Reminder, the three main points: noise is bad, silence is good. It's beneficial to wrap silence into your personal and or professional life. So this last slide is just a favorite quote of mine. It's by a 13th century Persian poet named Rumi. And he said, "The quieter you become, the more you are able to hear." The quieter you become, the more you're able to hear. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. Think about what it is that you need to hear. And if you don't mind, Amy's going to put another poll in and just ask you, do you hope or plan to find ways to weave quiet and silence into your daily life? And I certainly hope that you will. I love seeing that. And if you don't, that's fine. This might not be for everybody, but I really do encourage you to think about that and make it a priority if you can. And then just for sake of time, we can end that poll. It looks like everybody's on board, which is wonderful. And I just want to share with you my contact information. I love talking about this. So if you have any questions, follow-up, comments, just feel free. My email's right there, my phone number. I am more than willing and happy to talk about this. And I'd like to just ask you, if you don't mind, we are always trying to be better teachers and provide better webinars. So Amy's going to throw in one last link here. We're getting you overload, but there's a Qualtrics survey that will ask you some questions about the webinar today, as well as ask you some demographic information. I know sometimes that seems bold, but it helps us make sure we're reaching all the audiences in the state and doing justice to reach all citizens of Ohio. So if you don't mind doing that, that's lovely. You need to go to that link, and then you'll also have to put in that code. So if you would do that right now, if you're able, that would be lovely, just so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of today. But with that, I will be quiet. I thank you so much for being here today. I hope it was helpful, and I hope that you find ways to listen to what needs to be heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. I just wanted to point out we do have one thing in the Q&A. Someone asked, have you read Noise, A Flaw in Human Judgment by Kahneman, just released on the impact of noise in decision making? You may want to read and or add it to your list.
Thank you. I have not heard of that, but I will certainly check it out. Thanks for that suggestion.
And thank you all for joining us. We will be sending out a recording of this along with the resources that were shared, so be on the lookout for that. And if there are no more questions, which I'm not seeing, oh wait, one just came in through the Q&A. What differences have you noticed in yourself since practicing silence?
Great. If you need to leave, go ahead and leave. So what differences have I noticed? My first knee-jerk reaction is that I've become an addict. I crave silence. And it's such a good thing to crave, right? It's much better than so many other vices in our world. But I know when I need it. I know how to ask for it. I know what works, and it has made a huge difference. I said at the beginning, I was in a funk, no two ways about it. And not that it was immediate and that I just crawled out of it, but I found a way to crawl out of it. And if I feel it coming, then I get outside. Like I said, it's silence for me, but also nature. I always joke that when I go out, I'm going to my therapist, and my therapist is silence and outside. So both of those two things together have been pure magic for me. So I appreciate the question. Thank you for asking.
Looks like we had another question. Oh, no, that was an awesome. Thank you. Perfect. All right. I am not seeing any more questions or anything at the moment. So in the interest of time, I will go ahead and stop the recording.